On the evening she buried her husband of 47 years, Naledi thought life had dealt her its harshest blow. But she was wrong. Just 3 weeks later, her stepdaughter, Zinnel, walked into the same kitchen where Naledi had cooked countless meals and struck her with words that cut deeper than death. The funeral wreaths on Tabo's grave had barely dried when Zinnel declared, her eyes cold as stone, "Naledi, grief will not feed you. From now on, you either earn your keep or find the streets your new home." It was a sentence sharp enough to sever what little family bond remained. Naledi's hands shook as she reached for the coffee pot, her black mourning dress clinging to her like the last remnant of her old life. Where are you watching from today? Kindly hit like, comment, and subscribe to this channel for more. Zinnel leaned against the counter, her manicured nails tapping with impatience. Tabo left everything to me, not to you, she said with chilling calm. I will not carry a widow who gives nothing back. Naledi stared at the woman she had raised since girlhood, yet all she saw was a stranger wearing her stepdaughter's face. With trembling dignity, Naledi whispered, Zinnel, it has only been 3 weeks. I still have my small pension. I can offer $700 a month. Zinnel's laughter was sharp, slicing through the air like broken glass. That won't keep the lights on. But I've already solved your problem. There's a wealthy man who needs private care. You were a nurse before you married father. This is perfect. Naledi bent to collect the shards of a fallen cup, her knees aching, her spirit breaking. Was this what remained of her years of sacrifice, reduced to a servant in her old age? The next morning, Naledi stood outside a mansion so vast it resembled a palace from legend. The driveway alone could have swallowed her entire old street. Her palms sweated as she pressed the gold-plated doorbell. Patricia, the stern house manager, received her with stiff formality. Mr. McCona requires constant assistance, she explained. He has been paralyzed from the waist down for 7 years. The position offers food, shelter, and more pay than most could dream of. But be warned. He has chased away 17 caregivers in less than 2 years. Naledi's stomach twisted. 17. What kind of man was waiting inside? Within a vast library lined with mahogany shelves and glass walls overlooking manicured gardens, Naledi finally met him. Emmanuel McCona sat in a wheelchair, silver hair brushing against his temples, his features still sharp with an echo of youth. His eyes, deep and searching, locked onto her face with unsettling intensity. For a heartbeat, Naledi felt like he was peeling away layers of her soul. Mrs. Naledi, he said in a low, commanding tone, please sit. Patricia excused herself, leaving them alone. Naledi's heart quickened. Something in his gaze stirred old memories, shadows of a past she thought long buried. Naledi sat stiffly in the chair across from Emmanuel, the silence between them charged like a storm waiting to break. His blue-gray eyes studied her so intently that she almost shifted under their weight. Patricia tells me you were a nurse once, he began, his voice low but edged with command. Naledi nodded, steadying her breath. Many years ago, before marriage. Emmanuel's lips curved, but it was not a smile. And your husband passed recently, he said, not as a question but a statement. I am sorry for your loss. Naledi bowed her head, her fingers twisting the silver ring still on her hand. When she looked up again, Emmanuel was still watching her, his gaze strangely unsettled. Have we met before, Mrs. Naledi? His tone was calm, but something flickered in his eyes, recognition or doubt. Naledi forced a smile, though her pulse quickened. I don't believe so, sir. Surely I would have remembered. Yet even as she spoke, unease crept into her chest. There was something about the curve of his jaw, the way he tilted his head, the sharpness in his voice. These fragments tugged at her memory like whispers from a locked room she dared not open. Emmanuel leaned back slightly, still unconvinced. Perhaps not, he murmured. Tell me then, why do you want this position? Naledi hesitated, the honest answer lodged in her throat, that her stepdaughter had thrown her out like worn shoes, that desperation had brought her here. Instead, she said softly, because I believe in caring for people. It is who I am. Something softened in his features, a shadow of the man he might once have been. And you are not afraid of challenges? He asked pointedly. Naledi thought of Zinnel's cold eyes and her cruel ultimatum. No, sir, she replied firmly. I am not. Emmanuel studied her in silence, then nodded. Patricia, leave us. The house manager hesitated before bowing out, closing the tall doors behind her. Emmanuel wheeled his chair closer, his movements precise despite the chair's limitations. Mrs. Naledi, he said, his voice dropping lower, I must warn you, I am not an easy man to serve. I am particular, demanding, and I will not be treated like a helpless invalid. If you work here, you will be respected, and you will be paid more than you imagined. But above all, I require loyalty. Can you give me that? Naledi's breath caught. He spoke with the weight of someone used to commanding empires, not just homes. Yet beneath the sternness, his eyes burned with something else, something that unsettled her more than his warning. Yes, Mr. McCona, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I can. He extended his hand. The moment their fingers touched, Naledi felt a jolt that shot through her like lightning, shaking memories she had locked away for nearly 50 years. Emmanuel's grip lingered, almost reverent. Welcome, Naledi, he said softly. She pulled away quickly, but deep inside, she knew her life had just shifted forever. Naledi's first week at the McCona mansion felt like living inside a palace that doubled as a prison. Her quarters were larger than the small flat she once dreamed of retiring in. A private sitting area, a bathroom polished like a hotel suite, luxuries she had never known. Yet each morning when she rose, she felt the heavy reminder that she was no guest here, but a servant. Emmanuel was exacting. Coffee at 7:30 sharp, newspapers arranged in strict order, medication administered without delay. One mistake, one delay, and his sharp tongue cut her pride. But in the quiet between commands, his eyes often lingered on her, as if chasing a memory. On the fourth morning, while Naledi carefully cut his grapefruit, Emmanuel asked suddenly, Your name, Naledi, is it a family name? She paused, knife trembling in her hand. Yes, my grandmother's name. She was from Bloemfontein. Emmanuel repeated the name softly, his voice unusually thoughtful. Bloemfontein. And where did you grow up? Naledi's heart raced. Here and there, she replied vaguely. My father moved a lot for work. It wasn't entirely false, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Emmanuel studied her face, but said nothing more. Still, she noticed his fingers tapping the armrest of his chair as if trying to solve a puzzle. That afternoon, Naledi unpacked the few boxes Zinnel had reluctantly allowed her to take. Most held simple belongings: clothes, an old kettle, a battered jewelry box. But buried beneath her scarves was a faded album she hadn't opened in decades. She sat by the window and unwrapped it with trembling hands. The first pages showed her life with Thabo. Wedding photos, baby pictures, birthdays. Then she found an older album, its leather cover cracked with age. Her heart raced as she turned to a page that nearly stopped her breath. A young man with dark hair, arms wrapped around a girl in a yellow dress, herself. The man's eyes were unmistakable. Emmanuel McCona. Naledi's hands shook as she traced the photograph. Back then he was not Mr. McCona, the powerful businessman. He was Sifo, the dreamer who once held her hand at the lakeside and whispered that he would build an empire for her. His eyes had been alive with fire, his laughter quick and warm. He had promised to marry her, to return within 2 years after leaving for Johannesburg to seek fortune. She had waited faithfully, but his letters had slowed, then stopped. Naledi, heartbroken, had believed herself forgotten. By the time Sifo returned, she had already married steady, dependable Thabo. Naledi turned another page and found the last letter Sifo had written, still tucked neatly where she had hidden it all those years. Her eyes blurred with tears as she read his words again. My dearest Naledi, I have fulfilled my promise. I have built a life and a home for us. I am returning next month to carry you across the threshold. Forever yours, Saipho. The letter was dated 3 weeks after she had already wed Tabo. Naledi pressed the paper to her chest, her heart splitting in two. He had kept his word. She had simply run out of time. A knock on her door startled her. She quickly shoved the album beneath a pillow. Patricia stepped in. "Mr. Makona requests you," she said briskly. Naledi composed herself, wiping her eyes before following. Emmanuel was waiting in his study, his wheelchair angled toward the gardens. His usual sternness seemed replaced by something softer, almost uncertain. "Naledi," he said quietly, "have you ever lived in Mahikeng? A small town near the border." The name hit her like thunder. Mahikeng, the place where they had first met, where he bought her sweet drinks at Larato's cafe, where they kissed by the lake. Her lips trembled. "I don't recall," she lied. Emmanuel turned his head, his eyes narrowing as if reading the truth in her silence. "There was a girl there," he said slowly. "She wore a yellow dress. She laughed like the world itself belonged to her." His voice broke for just a second. Naledi's chest tightened. How could he remember after nearly 5 decades? She tried to steady her voice. "Perhaps you mistake me for someone else, sir." But his gaze did not waver. He whispered a single phrase that made her knees weak. "Yellow dress. Always beautiful in yellow." Naledi excused herself quickly, her heart pounding. The past was clawing its way back. That night Naledi could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the boy Saipho, young and fierce with dreams, and the man Emmanuel, silver-haired and broken by life's weight. Could they truly be the same? By dawn, she resolved to face the truth. She found him in the conservatory, sunlight catching the silver in his hair. "Good morning," she greeted softly, placing his coffee just where he liked it. He looked up, exhaustion written across his features. "Did you rest?" he asked. "No," Naledi admitted. "Did you?" Emmanuel gave a ghost of a smile. "No. I kept thinking of yellow dresses." Naledi's breath caught. There was no point hiding anymore. "The cherry sodas at Larato's cafe were too sweet," she murmured. "You always told me to choose vanilla instead." Emmanuel froze, his eyes filling with unspoken recognition. "Naledi Masigo," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You wore your grandmother's locket, and you had a scar on your left knee from falling off a bicycle when you were 9. Naledi touched her throat instinctively where the locket once rested. Emmanuel leaned closer. "I gave you a silver ring, a promise I would replace it with diamonds. Do you still have it?" Naledi's tears betrayed her silence. "I have carried that ring with me for 49 years, Emmanuel said, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. He opened it to reveal the silver band, tarnished but intact. Naledi gasped. "You kept it." His voice cracked. "I kept everything. Every letter, every photograph, every dream. And I never married, Naledi. I built my empire, but no one else was you." The weight of his confession pressed on them both. "Saipho," she whispered, her old name for him trembling on her lips. Their eyes locked, not as caregiver and employer, but as two souls who had been waiting half a lifetime to collide again. Naledi sat in stunned silence, her eyes fixed on the silver ring glinting faintly in Emmanuel's hand. All those years, she had believed his promises were the foolish dreams of a young man. Yet here he was, proof that he had kept every word. "Why didn't you come back sooner?" she whispered. His jaw tightened. "I did. But by the time I returned, you were already married. I thought you had chosen someone better." Naledi shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I thought you had forgotten me, Saipho. Your letters stopped." Emmanuel's voice trembled with anger. "They were stolen. My business partners intercepted them. They didn't want me tied to a small-town girl." Naledi gasped. All the wasted years suddenly made cruel sense. She thought of those nights she wept in silence, believing he had abandoned her. She thought of how she had rushed into Tobo's steady arms, desperate for a love that would not vanish. Emmanuel's gaze softened. I even hired an investigator, Naledi. I knew when you married. I knew when your children came. I knew when Tobo fell sick. I never stopped watching. Never stopped hoping. Her heart pounded painfully. You were there all along. His voice dropped to a whisper. Yes. Always at a distance, always too late, but never without love. 4 days afterward, Naledi moved through the mansion in a daze. Every glance at Emmanuel stirred the ache of lost years, yet also the warmth of something reborn. He no longer addressed her formally. He called her Naledi with the same tenderness of youth, as if time had folded back on itself. At night, she lay awake, wondering if love after decades was a blessing or a curse. She knew Zinnel would not understand. Already, her stepdaughter questioned why Naledi lingered in the mansion long after her job hours were done. Naledi's heart told her this was no job anymore. It was destiny knocking again. The fragile peace broke one afternoon when Zinnel called. Her voice was sharp, brimming with suspicion. Stepmother, people say they've seen you parading around town with some old man in a wheelchair. Are you not ashamed? Father is barely cold in the ground. Naledi gripped the phone tightly. Zinnel, you will not speak to me like that. I am allowed companionship. Zinnel scoffed. Companionship? Don't deceive yourself. Everyone sees it. You are after his money. Naledi's cheeks burned with fury. She wanted to shout, but Emmanuel motioned gently for the phone. His voice came through like steel. Zinnel, your stepmother is no gold digger. If anything, I am the one chasing her. There was silence on the line. Then Zinnel spoke with forced sweetness. Ah, Mr. Makona, I didn't realize you were listening. My concern is only for her dignity. Emmanuel's voice hardened. Your concern is only for your inheritance. Let me be clear. Your stepmother is free to choose her life. You have no say in it. Zinnel's mask cracked, bitterness spilling out. You don't understand. She has always been difficult, clinging, high maintenance. Always wanting to be taken care of. Naledi's heart shattered. She had raised Zinnel as her own, only to be painted as a burden. Emmanuel's words cut through the silence. Difficult. This woman carried your father through sickness and grief while you looked away. The call ended coldly, but Naledi knew Zinnel's anger was not finished. That evening, she sat beside Emmanuel in the conservatory, the fading sun casting gold across his silver hair. She will come here, Naledi said softly. And when she does, she will try to destroy what we have. Emmanuel's hand rested on hers, firm and steady. Let her come. I did not build this empire by bending to threats. And I will not lose you to her cruelty. Naledi searched his eyes, finding both fire and fear. But Saipho, she will say things to make you doubt me. Emmanuel shook his head. No words can undo 50 years of love. True to Naledi's fears, Zinnel arrived at the mansion 2 days later, dressed in sharp black like a lawyer preparing for court. She greeted Patricia with icy politeness before striding into Emmanuel's study. Naledi followed reluctantly, her chest heavy with dread. Zinnel's eyes scanned the luxurious room, widening slightly at its grandeur. She turned her gaze sharply on Naledi. So this is your plan? To live like a queen on the back of his pity? Emmanuel wheeled closer, his face unreadable. Careful with your words, he warned. But Zinnel only laughed, her bitterness spilling like venom. What else should I call it? This marriage of convenience you are plotting. Naledi's mouth opened, but Emmanuel spoke first. You think this is convenience? I have waited nearly 50 years for her. Zinnel froze, shock breaking her composure. 50 years. Emmanuel's voice grew firm. Before your father, before your existence, Naledi was mine. We loved each other deeply. Circumstances tore us apart, but love has brought us back. If you came here to stop it, you waste your breath. Zinnel's jaw tightened. And what about money? You expect me to believe she wants nothing from you. Naledi rose, her voice trembling but strong. Zinnel, I do not want his fortune. I want the man I lost, and by God's grace, I found him again. Emmanuel leaned forward, his eyes burning. If money is your only concern, let me ease it. I've already changed my will. Everything will go to charity. The children's ward at Unity Hospital, the widow's shelter, the orphanage. Naledi will inherit nothing. Zinnel gasped, her face draining of color. You gave it all away. Emmanuel nodded calmly. Yes, because I will not let greed poison this love. If she stays, it will be for me, not my fortune. Naledi felt tears rise, not from sadness but from relief. Finally, his love was shielded from suspicion. Zinnel staggered, her pride shaken. This is madness, she whispered. The silence in the study was thick. Naledi stood tall, her stepdaughter trembling with rage before her. You always accused me of taking from you, Naledi said softly. But now you see there is nothing to take. I love him, Zinnel. That is all. Emmanuel reached for Naledi's hand, lifting it gently. And I love her. That truth is immovable. Zinnel's eyes blazed, but beneath the fury was something else, fear. She could see her hold over Naledi slipping, her control dissolving. With a bitter laugh, she turned toward the door. Fine, she spat. Throw away your dignity. But don't expect me to pick up the pieces when it all crumbles. When the heavy door slammed shut behind Zinnel, silence filled the mansion like a lingering echo. Naledi's chest rose and fell with exhaustion, yet her hand remained firm in Emmanuel's grasp. For the first time since Tabo's funeral, she felt something other than grief. She felt chosen, cherished. Emmanuel's eyes softened as he studied her. Naledi, for decades I was a man of wealth but not of joy. With you here, I have become rich in the one thing I lacked. Her lips trembled. And I thought love had passed me by forever. They held each other's gaze, two lives broken by time but stitched together again. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the mansion shed its air of loneliness. Emmanuel, once bitter and rigid, began to smile again. He asked Naledi to move into his wing, not as a caregiver but as his companion. The staff whispered, the neighbors gossiped, and Zinnel remained cold in her silence, but Naledi no longer cared. She discovered that joy could return even in old age. Emmanuel would sit by the conservatory windows, handing her wildflowers from the garden because he remembered they had always been her favorite. At night, they read together, their laughter soft against the walls that once echoed only commands. Then, one quiet morning, Emmanuel surprised Naledi with a simple gold band. Not the diamonds I once promised, but a symbol of what we have now, he said gently. They married in the mansion's garden, with Patricia and 2 witnesses from the local church. There was no choir, no crowd, only the sound of birds and the weight of vows finally fulfilled. When he slid the band onto her finger, Naledi's eyes filled with tears. For 50 years, life had denied them this moment. Now, against every odd, it was theirs. In that simplicity, it was more beautiful than any grand wedding. News of their marriage reached Zinnel soon after. She stormed into the mansion, her face pale with disbelief. But instead of fury, she found Naledi seated calmly beside Emmanuel, both wearing gold bands. For a long moment Zinnel said nothing. Then her shoulders slumped and her voice cracked. I thought you wanted his money, but you've taken nothing. I thought you would embarrass us, but you look happy. Naledi stood, her tone steady but kind. Happiness is not stolen, Zinnel. It is found in honesty and love. One day, you will learn this truth. Tears glistened in Zinnel's eyes, though her pride kept her silent. That evening, Naledi and Emmanuel sat together in the garden, watching the sunset bathe the sky in gold. Do you think she will forgive me one day? Naledi asked softly. Emmanuel kissed her hand, his touch gentle. Perhaps. But even if she does not, we have forgiven ourselves for the lost years. That is enough. Naledi leaned against him, her heart light at last. In that moment, she understood what life had been teaching her all along. Sometimes love is delayed, but never destroyed. And in the wisdom of an elder, she whispered, when true love waits patiently, not even time nor bitterness can bury it.